welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast, and also video this time.
That's right. Yeah, we're live at the PhiusCon conference in Chicago right now. So this is kind of novel, and we get to be in the same space as well.
Yeah, physically in the same place. Yeah. Very, very cool to be here in Chicago, enjoying PhiusCon, and also getting to meet, getting the whole crew of the Passive House Accelerator together, which is fantastic. Now, this week we've got a couple of episodes, but we have a special component podcast.
We do, yeah. So recently I sat down with Rob Blount and Mahnaz Nikbakht of ROCKWOOL North America to talk about their work in the Passive House community, their support for the PhiusCon conference, and what's going on in terms of their innovations and what's up next for product development. So it was a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
Well, welcome Mahnaz and Rob to the Passive House podcast. It's great to have you both here. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
Yeah. So, and a big thank you also to ROCKWOOL North America for its its founding support and sustaining support as a founding sponsor. It means a lot to us, and a big thank you to both of you for that support.
Well, we're super happy to be part of this.
Awesome. So let's get started with your personal Passive House stories. I mean, we're going to dive into a whole bunch of detail about some of the cool things that are going on with ROCKWOOL and your projects, but I think it'd be great for listeners to get a sense of how you were introduced to Passive House, how is important to you, is it important to you, and also then the connection with your work at ROCKWOOL.
So I've been working in one way or another in construction since I was a teenager, since I was 13. At first as a carpenter, and then working on my own, doing historic restoration, along with a lot of other more artisanal construction, and always efficiency and the benefits of the design outside of aesthetics have always been a thing. And then for a time there, I worked on what I kind of term the dark side of construction in high rise, where it was New York City, and it was all curtain wall and everything facing outward. It wasn't a very efficient material in terms of thermal conductivity. And about that time, I got my lead AP and quickly realized that it wasn't going that far towards helping. And it wasn't until I left New York and came to Massachusetts and worked on a lot more outside of the box projects, most of them for higher ed, where of course the bar is set higher in terms of sustainability and energy efficiency. And that was my first introduction to Passive House. And at the same time, I moved into this 250-year-old farmhouse, which is the proverbial energy hog. So while I've started to look at making up for some of my past sins, if you will, in construction, and doing better with what I was doing, currently, I was also doing it at home. So, and then almost 4 years ago now, Todd Kimmel, who used to work with us and is very active in the Passive House community, reached out to me and asked if I was interested in joining the ROCKWOOL team. And the rest is history. Immediately, as I came on board with ROCKWOOL, was given the bandwidth to go out and embrace the parts of the design and construction community that are they're doing the best work in terms of sustainability, and Passive House, of course, is kind of the top of the heap there. So I'm actually now just about to finish my CPHC, so I can join the rest of our teammates who at ROCKWOOL who are Passive House certified.
How do you see then ROCKWOOL's work and sort of mission align with that pathway that you just described for yourself? Like, what is ROCKWOOL's relevance to Passive House?
Well, I think for starters, sustainability is a huge component of who we are as a company. We really look to conserving energy, sustainability, and circularity as kind of the three-legged stool of who we are as a company and continue to try and do better with all of those daily. And, from a circularity standpoint, we are reaching points with some facilities in Europe where we're actually taking product back because we've been in the construction marketplace in Europe since the 30s. Some of those buildings are actually starting to be taken apart, and where possible, we're trying to put that material directly back into our mix. We know that we have soft spots when it comes to the carbon footprint of our material, and we're constantly looking at ways to make more efficient our production processes. We committed to science-based targeting initiatives to lower our overall GHG production by a third by 2034. We're pretty far along that path, over 20% of the way there. For those who aren't familiar with SBTIs, it's a third-party verification of your goals in terms of sustainability. There are two levels in the SBTI world, acknowledging that you're committing to them and actually setting the goals. So we've actually set goals, and we're far down that road. And if you look at the thousands of different organizations, corporations that have committed to SBTIs, you'll see that there aren't a whole lot of them in the construction products arena that are committed to that.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Awesome.
So I'm just going to refer, I'm going to refer to the sustainability report that ROCKWOOL publishes every year, where you can actually see the goals that ROCKWOOL has set. So we've adopted 10 of the 17 UN sustainability goals, and those are being followed up through this initiative. So you can actually follow up on the progress that we're doing. So we're trying to not only talk about it, but actually make a change.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll make sure we have a link to the latest report in the show notes, so people can access that. Okay, so Mahnaz, what about your story? Both personally toward Passive House at ROCKWOOL, and then I know you're also doing a bunch of work in the community in Quebec. Yeah. So if you could tell us about that work, that'd be great too.
So it's kind of a long story. I'm half German. I studied in Germany, and therefore Passive House has somehow always been around. Ecological building, green roofs, all of this sort of ecological stuff was super interesting for me during my studies. I was working for DuPont in Luxembourg at the time, where I did my first Passive House presentation, which was really only about air tightness, but I actually attended a conference that was organized by the BBA in the UK. So this is probably in 2003 or 4. And then I've been in Canada since 2010. And in 2014, there is this Maison Passive Québec, so the Quebec Passive House Association, which was founded, and I've been part of that since 2015. So that's what I'm doing actively now. I've chaired it 2 years, and then I took a break, and I'm back being chair of the association. So it's a somehow ingrained passion.
Right, absolutely. And who are the players that, like, who's the membership of the organization?
Yeah, so our association, it's basically run by volunteers, and the difficulty that we face is we're trying to promote Passive House in French. So for Quebec, in French language. Yeah. And we've previously collaborated with La Maison Passive in France, but we can't really use their documentation too much because they don't build the way we do. So we would need to look at all of the English language or the North American documentation that is available, and then translate that or create our own, which as a volunteer association is kind of difficult. We really try to educate the market on what is Passive House. And then the other difficulty we have is that we have a lot of hydroelectricity here. We don't pay a lot for energy. And so it's the other challenge, trying to promote a good way of building, a smart way of building, like the way to go when people don't really need to pay a lot for energy. So I do actually get that question after presenting Passive House. Yeah, but why should we do this here when energy is so cheap? So that's really a hard one to deal with. And then, the next level of promoting Passive House is being able to provide training to I'm a certified passive house consultant, and I did, I think, the first French language exam in Quebec, but it's not so easy to prepare that sort of a training. So today we actually collaborate with Passive House Canada. So they're helping us with, they're basically our provider for the training in French language, and that way we can serve our market here. Who are the players? Well, it's really people that are passionate about Passive House, because there is not necessarily a government based support here, no funding specific to Passive House, and yeah, cheap energy.
Yeah, I can relate to the cheap energy piece. Here in Seattle, we also have a lot of hydro, and Passive House Northwest, which is an organization that's been around for a good 10 years, is I think we have similar challenges in terms of communicating about Passive House. And I mean, it just ends up being other benefits other than dollar savings for sure. And you just held a conference, is that right?
Yeah, so this year we've actually managed to do a conference with an architectural firm. It's a member of our board. That's Bruno Verge from Boone Architecture. So he's got a Passive House project that he's working on, that he did a conference on. And we also had a site visit, which is not a Passive House, but it's basically, we're trying to promote any high performance energy conscious construction where people trying to apply Passive House principles just to get the message out, to motivate people, to inspire people to build better. So yeah, we're super happy that we've got this. We're preparing a networking event. So I mean, I'm very inspired by the Passive House Accelerator, but unfortunately it's not in French, right?
I know, so, I know.
Yeah,
we'll have to, we can collaborate on that, Mahnaz.
Yeah, let's do that. But yeah, that's what we're trying basically to do, is to get all the Passive House or high performance movements together to just make the market move in the right direction. And
yeah,
well, what's also interesting is that the energy code has just been since the beginning of the year updated. So we finally adopted in Quebec the energy code of 2015. The one that was applicable before was from the 80s.
That's just crazy.
This is great for us.
Crazy.
Yes,
yeah, that's huge.
So,
yeah.
So now all the architects are struggling with, oh my God, we need to do effective R values, and how do we do that? Yeah. And I think people are getting through that more conscious about building better, more energy efficient, and what is a thermal bridge? Finally, everybody knows what we're talking about. And also on the contractor side, we still don't have an obligatory blower door test, which would be great.
Yeah.
But let's say at least the requirements are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that basically gives this whole Passive House movement for Quebec some drive, because people are getting more conscious about how to build so that it's performing, and they're finally understanding, they're open to understanding that there is a benefit.
Yeah, there's that kind of mindset of recognizing that energy performance is a key piece of design.
Yes.
Regardless of what there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, of course, this whole pandemic, which made us all think about our future and our planet and, carbon. And so let's say, finally, for Quebec, at least I can say that there is movement, there is motivation, people are interested, and I really hope that this is going to move everything in the right direction, because we can't just pretend that changes aren't necessary. They are.
Yeah.
So.
Well, fantastic. That's good. That's good to hear. I'm glad that there's a sense of momentum there. That's awesome.
Totally.
I think, yeah, good work. Okay, well, let's pivot back to ROCKWOOL. And can you tell us a little bit about the team there that's leading innovation?
It's actually pretty exciting. I don't think I've worked on such a small team that has so many, that's not an architectural firm that's specializing in Passive House, that has as many CPHCs or CPHDs, so or folks that are very closely involved. So as I mentioned, I'm just I should be finishing up my CPHC this year. Mahnaz as a CPHD, our Director of Sustainability Manager, Alejandra Nieto, is also a CPHD. She worked with our Director of Tech, Antoine Hebelion, to put together our Passive House Solutions Guide, as well as a number of other technical documents, white papers that help to help folks understand how to best utilize our products with in Passive House builds. We support the industry in a number of ways, but one of the big ones is with a suite of technical services through ROCKWOOL Building Science. So really that was Antoine's baby for quite some time. So they support projects with general hydrothermal analysis, WUFI analysis, 2D and 3D effective R-value calculation. They'll do whole building modeling if you're willing to go down the rabbit hole that is all of that information, and actually are now also doing OITC and STC modeling for projects as well. I used this service a lot before I joined ROCKWOOL when I was a project manager doing design assist. It's complementary, it's non-proprietary, generally pretty quick. When you're getting from that DD to ST stage where we need to know how thick is our wall assembly, how does it perform, does it it's code considerate, and it's they tell me it's a week for reports, but it's been a while since I submitted a report that didn't come back in a few days. And these folks are building scientists first, so they're there to say whether or not our solutions are the appropriate ones for the information that's being put in front of them.
That's an important resource. And you mentioned the Passive House Solutions Guide. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And we'll make sure there's a link to it as well.
Yep. Interestingly enough, the Passive House Solutions Guide started off as a number of Passive House certified details. And what we found is that it's kind of grown past that in that, as we see different types of Passive House projects being put before us. I'm in the Boston area where we're doing just an unbelievable amount of Passive House construction, and not, I think, what's typical, right? We see Winthrop Center in the form of a high-rise Passive House project, the Newton North development in a number of different buildings. So really what, at this point, we really want to try and support Passive House by looking at it, and not necessarily case-by-case basis, but looking at how to make the best use of our products in conjunction with others to get the best solution. And it's how do I put it best? A one size fits most way of looking at things. And clearly a lot of that starts with the analysis around thermal bridging, but certainly what's going on with moisture and vapor movement as well, as we start to add more and more insulation to our builds.
Mahnaz, is there anything else you want to add to that before we take the next step here?
Well, one of the things I do want to add is that I take pride in being with ROCKWOOL is that we really have a lot of great technical documentation. We do work a lot with building science labs to develop better solutions and to be sure that they're working. And we have a lot of really good technical documentation that is being updated. So that's definitely something that I'm very happy about with Antoine in his new role as the technical director, that he's looking at giving all of our technical documentation a facelift, not only a facelift, actually a real update. And so I can only say that our documentation is really worth looking at and useful, and it's all being made better, which makes me very happy. As I said, I have a training as a civil engineer, so whenever it's technical, it's great. So yeah, we have a lot of new stuff coming up, new design guides that will help you design, walls with continuous insulation and different types of attachments and so on. So a lot of stuff that's going to be coming up. That's interesting.
So speaking of new stuff, how about new products? What are some updates? What's coming?
Yeah. So Using mineral wool for EFS solutions is not really brand new, but I do want to mention it. We have kind of two different offerings because we have like the Canadian and the US market. So I'm more the Canadian. I have more the Canadian know-how for that. It's been approved by the EFS Council of Canada, obviously the use of mineral wool for their systems. What is interesting is that the product that we make, it's not the final product. We're providing a ROCKWOOL board that is ready and suited for a third-party fabrication, which means that these EFS manufacturers, they're going to develop their own rain screen system, and they can actually work with our material to add the drainage channels that are necessary for this application.
Oh, that's cool.
To avoid moisture problems in particular, right? So what you can now do is have a solution for EFS systems that is going to be permeable, that is giving you a great performance for fire. So whenever you don't have sprinkler systems, you can use this. And it really helps for the moisture management and also the acoustics and the sustainability. So one of the examples of a project like that, you know it already, is the Ken Soble Tower that was done in Hamilton in Ontario, which is an retrofit project. I think it's the biggest.
Yeah.
Also been pretty widely profiled on the accelerator.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's another thing. We'll add some links to those resources, both I think articles and presentations. Yeah.
So the difficulty a little bit is like, where do I get the product? It's not really ROCKWOOL that does this. We're basically providing the board that is then being modified by these different EFS manufacturers. At least that's a solution for Canada. There are a number of different products out there that you can use to find a solution for your project.
And on the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Rob, what do you have to add?
So on the US side, of course, I think it's somewhat similar in that it is kind of driven by the system provider. So for instance, here in the US, I think the first pilot project that we've done is actually kind of in my neck of the woods at Gillette Stadium, a small pilot project through Drive-It. So the Drive-It EFS system is now supporting a stone wool-based solution. We're about to also release final tested systems through BASF, which is rebranded as I think Master Build Systems now. A little bit different approach to each of those. Across the board, the big difference between stone wool based EFS and EPS is of course mechanical attachment, which some might view as a downside, but from a former enclosure consultant perspective who's taken apart an EFS system or two, I view that as a benefit. Here in Boston and in New York City, where we see the likes of Berto 2 and Local Law 97 as motivation for retrofitting buildings for better energy efficiency, there are plenty of designers out there that have been asking often, when do we see a stone wool based EFS system, because it's a great solution for existing building overclads where that's appropriate. And the other things that we've I think more so in Canada than in the US, that's been prevalent is the direct application of stucco systems over our rigid board products. That's kind of been there in the past, but it's also been kind of up to the installer exactly what that looks like. But we have some good, better, best scenario tested details that'll be released here, I think, in the new year. That I think are also a good solution for that overclad challenge.
Yeah, cool. So stay tuned for that info.
Yeah, and no secret goes totally kept. Certainly, a little bit of it has started to trickle out, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay.
A few folks will say, "Wait a second, I've seen those details already."
But you both mentioned Ken Soble Tower and Winthrop Center, and two incredibly important, significant passive house projects, kind of globally, and one retrofit, one new construction. So could we dive in a little bit deeper into both of those projects maybe? And I know there are lots of resources about both projects on the Accelerator site, but there are probably folks who are listening who aren't necessarily aware of the kind of overview of these. And so maybe starting with Ken Soble, like what is that project? What is the building type? What were some of the challenges, and why was ROCKWOOL a good fit for solving those challenges?
So the Ken Soble Tower is a rehabilitation of a post-war apartment building in Hamilton. I'm not sure how many stories, 18 stories from 67. And this project was dealing with a number of difficulties, like the envelope was deteriorating, there was no insulation, mold issues, lack of thermal control. The systems inside were not really up to speed anymore. So these were all sorts of the reasons why the project was taken up on for renovation. And the solution was an overclad solution. And the question was, how can we do something that is going to give us really good energy performance? How we're going to reduce thermal bridging to make it more comfortable for the residents? How can we do it also without kicking everyone out?
Yeah.
And also the resiliency was a factor that was really interesting here. So fire as much as general passive climate resiliency. So the solution here was an overclad with, in this case, it was called, it's a puck system from Duroc that was used as an eave solution. And the resiliency of the system was also analyzed to determine how long will people be able to stay within this building once it has been renovated, without having to move when we're missing, when we have a blackout, when we have electricity. I only know the French word, panne d'électricité. As well as for overheating. And, a passive house solution just gives you all of this resiliency that, you don't need to be running to a shelter in the middle of winter, because, we're in a cold climate here. So those were some of the aspects that were considered.
Given the population inside of that particular building, right? It's certainly folks that are more vulnerable and at risk, and elder care or a more elderly population, and perhaps moving folks out of those out of their spaces versus being able to stay there for a few days in the case of a blackout during winter conditions or even summer conditions is certainly a big consideration in how that retrofit was approached.
That's really why they chose this solution. It's a 6-inch stone wool solution with an eave system, and obviously the non-combustibility of the system is a big plus. And then because you just don't want to run the risk with that type of occupants, and also that the solution is able to deal with humidity. So you're able to have a non-combustible solution with mineral wool, but having these drainage channels that allow you to have a feasible solution, because we all know what happens if you don't have proper drainage behind the system, right? So there's always this bit of a scare that we know from the West and BC. So these are the reasons why this was chosen, and then to be using a liquid applied water resistant barrier over which we could install the mineral. So
it's a remarkable project. So it's and really inspiring. So and it's a big tower, right? There's another even bigger tower in Boston called the Winthrop Center. I think that the big tower is probably the end of the commonality, though, between those two projects. They couldn't be more different. So could you talk a little bit about Winthrop Center and how ROCKWOOL played a role there?
Yeah, really interesting, having come from, like I said earlier, the dark side, the curtain wall world,
right.
And made a conscious choice to kind of turn on my heel and go in a different direction. But the folks at Stephen Winters Associates and Handel, who we worked with on a couple other projects, Cornell Tech, which I think has been profiled on the Accelerator as well, really did something amazing there. We've got the portion of the building that is the office portion that's passive, big departure from what we see in curtain wall, right? An 11-inch deep system with triple glazing, 6 inches of our material in that in the spandrel areas, and then an additional 5 inches of material behind to be able to meet that thermal profile, and with hard back pans, which makes it all the more difficult. But it's interesting that as this happened, we have kind of redoubled our efforts in looking at how we can better support curtain wall installation here in Boston. We're putting up labs on spec, like it's a new thing to do, but there are a bunch of folks that are trying to make these glass boxes passive, and certainly the volume to surface area ratio works as it does for Winthrop. So we've partnered with STI, who handles the slab edge fire safing clip systems that install the spandrels, and all the testing to make sure that we don't do big towers like this, passive house or otherwise, without UL testing around floor to floor flyer spread. But we're just starting conversations now with the folks from Stephen Winters Associates and Handel and Millennium Partners on a case study around Winthrop, and there's so much fantastic data, and we're looking forward to 2024 when we're hitting we're hitting some collected data from actual occupancy. But I've been through that project twice now on tours, and I would go a third time. Anybody out there who gets the opportunity to do so, it's well worth the price of admission.
Yeah, no kidding. I've toured it twice too at the Passive House Network conference. There was a tour, and then I was able to follow up and visit the site with Brad Mahoney of Millennium Partners, or MP Boston. It's a remarkable building for sure. So that's great to hear about this kind of consortium of innovators who are really examining passive house and curtain wall.
It's not typical, I guess, but it's, we're not going to necessarily drive developers away from the desire to have a big sleek box. And I can't say enough good things about Brad and his advocacy within Millennium to make this go. It's really something pretty incredible. Yeah.
Mahnaz, were you going to say?
I was going to say, Robert, I'm waiting for the invitation to come and see that project.
I'm ready for you to be in Boston any day of the week.
Yeah. Awesome. It is. Yeah, it's amazing what's happening in Boston. That was so inspiring to be there a few months ago. But speaking of cities that are having conferences, Chicago is about to have, well, I think when this airs, it will have just happened. PhiusCon. PhiusCon is the big conference that Phius puts on every year. It's in Chicago, and ROCKWOOL is a major supporter of the conference. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We are a gold level sponsor of the conference and of Phius for the year. We're super excited. We want to embrace all things Passive House, and historically, we've always been participant, but wanted to kind of go a step further this year. And I'll be joined here by our new Director of Communications and Public Relations, Sarah Sinovich. Our local rep, Denise Alvera, who is the architectural manager here for the Chicago area, and Chris Jessen, who's on our R-Class team. So we have a team of folks, the R-Class team, residential class, who are specifically out there engaging builders on site, residential, typically high performance construction. As codes change, as people start to build passive, or at least build to passive levels, clearly continuous insulation is required, and a lot of contractors don't know what to do with it. So we have a team of folks who are on site with folks, making them comfortable with how to use the material, some tips and tricks that make their life a little easier. So that's the team of 4 that'll be here. We're very excited about sponsoring, also because there's some component that allows for students to be at the conference as a piece of our sponsorship. So trying to educate and get that next generation of passive house advocates aware and excited about passive house.
And you're mentioning that you're in Chicago now.
Yes,
yeah,
I
right.
to Chicago this morning.
Right. At the time of the taping, I should say. And I'll be there tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to seeing you there. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun for sure. Well, thanks for the support of the event. That's really, really key. So, cool. Well, this has really been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess I would want to say that for those of you that are in the New England area, Passive House Massachusetts is having their annual symposium coming up here in November. As a guy that lives a bit north of Boston, ROCKWOOL will be a sponsor in the symposium. I know that there will be some fantastic content and a great cast of subject matter experts in Massachusetts to profile what we've been doing in Massachusetts this year, not only in terms of Passive House, but in terms of all the other sustainability efforts that have been happening in Mass this year. It's been an exciting year for doing things better in our state.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and I just added that to our list of links that we'll include in the show notes, the link to the information about the annual symposium. So
yeah, I'm certain that it was going to appear somewhere in a weekly Passive House email, or PHA.
Yeah, definitely. Well, fantastic. Rob, thank you so much. Mahnaz, thank you so much.
Thanks,
it's also great to learn about the local work you're doing in promoting Passive House in Quebec and in Massachusetts. So we all have a lot of work to do. So I appreciate that, and thank you again to ROCKWOOL for your support.
All right, thanks, Zach. Great interview. Enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was fun. And we are joined by a special guest actually here at the exhibit hall of PhiusCon, Rob Blount. So Rob, why don't you come on in, have a conversation here with Matthew.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rob. That was great. I really enjoyed listening to that. Not just obviously about the products, but also hearing your backstory. It's great hearing about people kind of in the industry who have had hands-on experience and then come in and become an expert in a product. But to have all that background in the sector, I think is pretty awesome. So.
Oh, thanks. It's super exciting to be here. We're really proud to be gold level sponsors for PhiusCon, and it's awesome to get to meet all of the behind the scenes folks at the Accelerator that make all the magic happen.
Well, it's much appreciated. So we've got some products here, and apologies for those that are listening. You'll have to go and check out this video or check out the images later on. But I think this is really useful to just show people what you've been talking about, because we talk about ROCKWOOL and some of these insulation materials. So it's quite good to visualize. So just explain briefly what we've got here. This is your external insulation options.
Right, so we have two products here, Comfort Board 80 and Cavity Rock. So one application, a clip and rail system with a semi-dense or with a a medium density board that you could use for new construction or a retrofit.
And by board, this is the board that you're talking about here,
Right.
the actual insulation material, right?
Right, correct. So we call them by board if they're on the outside.
So it's
and
a board on a board. 'cause
medium
this
density.
is the board
Yeah.
of the exterior
Right.
of the building, and then this is outside of that, and then what? So normally you wouldn't see this, right? When
Correct.
The building's finished.
So we have the thermally broken clip, just these stainless steel screws passing through this kind of double-walled cell. These from Cascadia. A Galvalume Z that fits into those clips. So
Yep.
typically those would be assembled like a 10-foot section at a
Right.
time and placed on the
I can see that around here. Yep.
And so this is only 2 inches. I think for minimally for Passive House we'll be looking at 4, but for the sake of ease, like moving these samples around, they're scaled down in thickness and R
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
This would be a minimum code wall easily.
Yeah. So what R value is this?
So 2 inches, this would be, it's about 95% efficiency depending on the spread of the clips.
Yep.
So something like an R8 effective. And then,
Which in my world is 1.5 probably.
yeah, right, exactly.
For metric out there. Yeah.
And then a direct applied system or screw-through
Yeah, right.
system, so a little more of a residential approach. This is again thinned down. I typically show this, and again at least 4 inches of continuous insulation.
Yep.
But pretty straightforward, right? A minimal amount of attachment to attach the board back to the substrate. So these hurricane washers, little plastic discs with screws. But really what's holding it on is the strapping. So this simple 1x3 strapping, in this case we've got GRK screws or something, but again, only the fasteners are passing through the insulation, so minimal thermal bridging. Again, very high level of efficiency, up to 95%.
Yep.
Of course, that differs by whether or not you use stainless or carbon steel screws,
Right.
and how many screws, right? The more cladding load that we're hanging off of either of these systems, the more attachment we're going to need.
Yep.
And this works both ways. We certainly see a Galvalume girt like this or hat shape, J shape used over a rigid board in a commercial setting with a heavier cladding load. So
Yep.
up to 15 pounds per square foot cladding load with this direct applied system.
Yep.
And because really what's happening here is we're creating a ladder truss when we do this, right? Tension, compression, and friction all working against each other to up the load capacity of the system.
Right. And how? So this is not weatherproof. There's a big cladding on the outside of this as a rain screen.
Yep.
But how does this handle some moisture?
So really, we look at this as acting as a secondary drainage plane. Probably 98% of the moisture is going to end up on the front side of the board. We've done extensive studies. RDH has actually helped us out with that on what these screw-through systems look like in terms of penetrating the ABB and the WRB and air leakage and water leakage. And it's really, it's close to zero. It does a little better in wood systems than it does in with chipboard and metal studs.
Right.
But all the same, it's the numbers are pretty fantastic.
Do you always require a membrane here?
behind
between
the insulation. So in both of these wall sections are set up with exterior and interior insulation. So in that case, of course, we want a vapor permeable management of our water, because we don't want to maximize the allowance for drying potential.
Yeah, I should just flip this around so people can see. That's a good point. This is the entirety of your insulation. You've actually got an insulation layer inside the wall as well.
Right.
So this is an additional layer of insulation on the outside.
And of course, if we were a passive house, we'd have a smart membrane on the inside there, and all
Right.
the
Sure. Yeah. But this is right across the building. So this is providing a continuous layer. So you're not getting that in the thermal bridging that you are with that internal layer.
Right. Continuity is key.
You're getting the continuous layer across the whole thing. And this is obviously really easy for new construction. Are these available as a retrofit option as well?
I'm actually doing this as a retrofit on my own 250-year-old historic farmhouse in New England.
Wow.
So 4 inches of insulation on the outside. I'm actually stripping back to the studs and filling
So
the
what was
inside.
what was the original cladding on there?
Original cladding is red cedar, lap siding, clapboards.
So taking those off?
Taking those off, taking the original sheathing off, filling the inner wall from the outside.
Yep.
New sheathing, new modern vapor
Right.
permeable membrane,
Yeah.
and then additional insulation, switching out to passive house level windows, so triple pane.
Yeah.
Actually, from one of the other vendors here
Nice.
at the Phius conference.
Yeah. And then will you be putting the same cladding back on?
In
Or
most
similar
places, yes. And
Wow.
because it's historic, I'm actually trying to retain the original clapboards that are on the front of the house and the original trim package.
That's very cool. I mean, and warm. But I mean, that's a great option for allowing to have that, retaining that original aesthetic, but having amazing performance underneath that.
And
With
of
the
course,
system.
I live in a part of the world where a new house is 150 years old, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of, eyes on this, even though we're not limited by any kind of historic overlay. I certainly want to make things as historically correct as possible.
Yeah.
While, for me, sustaining or preserving these structures also, there's a sustainability component
Yeah.
too. We can't continue to live in
There's some serious embodied carbon in there. That's
actually the bricks in my house were the clay was quarried in the back of my field, and
It's probably
kilned
well
on site.
accounted for by now. Yeah.
I've got a lot of embodied carbon, and I'm trying to make them use it.
Yeah. Where's the best place for people to find out more?
Of course, to visit our website. We talked a little bit about vapor permeability and the building science, about how these wall sections go together. We have a building science department within ROCKWOOL that helps support everybody's builds, but especially Passive House, with doing some suite of technical services. So hygrothermal analysis, WUFI analysis, WUFI passive. We do effective 2D and 3D values.
Wow.
We're actually doing acoustic modeling now too, so STC, OITC assessments for what you're going to get out of your wall, not just thermally, but acoustically.
So you can
as well.
help designers, architects with all of that?
Yeah, and this is a service that I used a lot actually before I joined ROCKWOOL. Getting from that SD to DD stage, where we need to know how thick that wall is going to be, how it's going to perform both thermally or hygrothermally, and things aren't going to change past that point. So making sure that we're complying with code, if that's in terms of minimum values, but hitting with the numbers that we want to hit for passive house values as well.
Awesome. So just look you up in ROCKWOOL.
Yep. My email is robert.blount@rockwool.com.
Yeah.
And
And for people, just search up rockwool.com and follow you wherever you are on the internet, and then get in touch.
yeah, and that seems to be quite a bit these days around PhiusCon. So
We're
pleased.
Yeah. Hey, well, thank you. Thanks for your time today,
Thank
but also
you.
thanks for your support and the great products and services out there. Really appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.